Welcome to another session of Engaging Influencers with your host, Nhlanhla Dakar. Today, we are starting a whole new series, and it's not just another first, but it's on this day that we shot our first video podcast. And I know this will get you more excited, more engaged, as you just not be able to listen to the man beyond the speaker of your phone, the headphones, whether it's the car, you're in a plane, or you're jogging, but you'll be able to see me now. And I'm really grateful for this milestone that has been achieved. I want to thank ECAS team for pushing so that we could get to this level. And I'm sure there'll be more videos that will be coming even from other podcasts that are being hosted by ECAS. So cheers. We are getting it right. So, without wasting much time, today we'll be discussing about building. As the new title of the series tells, Build, Baby, Build. We have to get to a point by the end of this series where everyone who will be following through gets a desire to say, I need to start something. I need to start a company. I need to build something that will employ people, something that will contribute to the GDP of this nation, something that will change the trajectory of the economy of my nation and of Africa as a continent. That's where I want us to get to by the end of this series. So, without saying much further ado, we need to understand why we need to build companies. So, by understanding, the first thing that we have to understand is the economic landscape of Africa. Because some of us are just staying in this country and we don't really have a picture of what the economy looks like. How bad our economy is compared to other economies on the world map. So, looking into that, the first point that I want us to understand today is that Africa only contributes to 3% of the world's economy. For whatever trade is going around this world right now, 3% of it is only contributed to by Africa. Well, it's still a number. Some of you might say that, but what you have to understand is we are the second biggest continent when it comes to landmass and when it comes to population. And yet, despite having so many people, a bigger country, we are only contributing to 3% of the economy. The other thing that we have to understand is that our export revenue, the money that we make from exporting goods outside beyond African borders, it also contributes to something close to 3%. And that is so dismal when you compare it to how much other companies get to make from just their sales outside their nation of production of their nation of where they are registered. For instance, last year, Africa made roughly $205 billion from exports. That means these were the goods that were exported beyond the African borders. But if you now go and find out from Apple, Apple made $245 billion from sales outside the United States. That can be considered as the export revenue for Apple. So Apple itself, it made $40 billion more than what the whole of Africa made. Now, I hope you understand why we need to build companies. All the farming that goes around in Africa, all the trade that goes around in Africa, it's less than what Apple makes by the end of the year. Otherwise, if we go now deeper beyond Africa to countries within Africa, and I'll give my country, Malawi, for instance, as an example, you find that one company is more valuable than all the companies on a stock exchange. For instance, Safaricom, the one that owns M-Pesa from Kenya, it's valuable than all the companies on Malawian Stock Exchange. It's worth about point something billion dollars, and the whole stock exchange, the valuation for the companies in Malawi is 3 point something billion dollars. So it's worth 5 billion more dollars. So that's how big other countries have. That's how big the companies are from other countries, and yet they even have more of this. I was even comparing the largest stock exchange in the whole world, which is New York Stock Exchange. There are about over 2,400 registered companies. And yet, for instance, an example, Malawi, there are only 13 companies. That's just like 0.0054%. A percentage of the companies that are registered from Malawi relative to those that are registered on New York Stock Exchange. And that's just one of the stock exchanges in the United States. So there are just so many companies out there, and they're so big. And yet we are surprised, or yet we talk about how USA is so well to do as a continent, and yet why we are so poor as a country, as a continent as well. It's easy to see. These guys are in the business of building companies, and companies that are so big, bigger than nations, bigger than continents in their economic activities. So someone, I don't know, maybe lied to us that all you have to do is think about farming 10 acres of land, then you have made it in life. Or you have to think about starting a small corner shop, then you have made it in life. No, the future of the economic prosperity of this nation is not in small businesses, SMEs. No, it is in building large businesses. And that's what we want by the end of this series. That's my dream. That's my goal. That by the end of this series, you have the heart to say, I have to do more. If not for me, for my nation. For the thousands and millions of youths that are employed. For the hundreds of thousands that are graduating from colleges, but they have nowhere to work. It's up to me, it's up to you to be able to build these companies that can employ so many people. I mean, for instance, Amazon itself, it employs 3 million people. And yet, a whole government is failing to create 1 million jobs. We think about even the Malawi Airlines. There are about, I think, not more than 5 planes that we own. Yet Amazon itself, it has 300 planes just doing deliveries. I think about FedEx. It has about 800 something planes. One company having multiple hundreds more planes than a whole nation. I'm telling you, the new future, the new trend of empires, it's not about the British Empire, it's not about the Roman Empire. Now, it's about building business empires. Businesses that make more money than nations. That's what we have to thrive to achieve in this nation. That's why we have to train our people in schools. That's why we have to inspire each other. That's why we have to discuss whenever we're together in 1 or 2 conversations. Let's just not talk about shoes. Let's just not talk about cars. Let's talk about how we can build these companies that can produce these shoes that people will be talking about. How we can build these companies that can manufacture these cars that people can talk about. That's where we have to get if we have to transform this nation and get ourselves a seat on the world table discussing things that matter. That's the power, that's the freedom that we have to achieve. And I hope this podcast will help you get there. So, why is it important for Africans to prioritize building companies? I think that's what we discuss for today, then we end it there. Then for the couple of weeks that will be coming, we'll be going in depth into this series. Then we'll be discussing point for point on how we can start a company, how we can grow it, how we can be able to scale it, how we can be able to make sure that it's a global competitor, and factors like those. Because we're not just going to build companies that are known in your area, that are known in your district. We're talking about building companies that a Zimbabwean will use, that an Egyptian will use, that an Asian person we use, an American we use, all the people from the world we use, we have to build for the global market. That's the difference between us and Americans. When Americans are building something, they think about the whole world. When they're building something, we think about the next street. No, we have to change our perspective. We have to build for the whole world, and that's where we want to get in this series. So, why is it important for Africans to prioritize building companies? The first point, job creation. Africa, as we speak right now, it contributes to 16.7% of the world's population. And it is going so fast that by 2030 alone, 1 out of 5 people will be living in Africa. And by 2050, there'll be 2.5 billion people from Africa. That means a quarter of the world will be from African economy. That sounds good. But that is disastrous if we are not creating jobs for these massive billions of people that will be living on this continent. There will be a whole lot of problems if we cannot cover up this population with the right amount of jobs for the people to work at. So when we build these companies, we'll be able to create employment opportunities for the growing population. And as I already said, that for instance, Amazon itself, it is able to create jobs for 3 million people. So imagine if you have 1,000 companies that are able to create jobs that are over 1 million people. That means you have created jobs for 1 billion people. That means almost half of the population is covered as far as jobs are concerned. So the only thing that can deal with this is the creation of companies. If we can create companies that can create more, economic activities that can be more income to hire more people, then we have sorted out this situation. So we need to create companies to deal with the growing population that is tremendously happening in this continent. The second point is that when you build more companies, we're able to attain economic growth. You see, companies are engines for economic growth. In fact, what you notice is that when you go through the list of all stock exchanges in the world and the market capitalization of countries, you find that the top 10 economies in the world, their market capitalization is over 50% of their GDP. So there's a relationship between a prosperous GDP and the market capitalization of a nation. If you want to have growing GDPs, we have to be serious about growing companies and big companies. We're not just talking companies, we're talking about companies that will be on stock exchanges. For instance, I already talked about Apple. Apple is able to generate over $240 billion from selling goods outside. Imagine if we're able to make $240 billion from selling goods outside Malawi. Would make way more beyond the money we've ever dreamt of as a nation. Right now, as we speak, the GDP of Malawi is about $10 billion plus somewhere there. That's just a fraction of what Apple makes. So, companies indeed bring in money into continents. And in specific terms, into countries. We have to be serious about building companies. The fourth thing is that it increases competitiveness. What am I trying to say? Right now, as we speak, Africa can hardly compete on the international market. But if I build more companies, we'll improve our competitive edge on a global scale. For instance, right now, if I was to start a company here that manufactures, let's say, phones, just to get the machinery, it had to be ordered from China. Just to get the people, I would have to hire those people from other countries, maybe from the UK, from the US, from China, from South Korea, to come and make in the company. Just to get some materials, I'd have to get beyond African borders. But imagine if some of these raw materials that I need for my company are found in Malawi. it will be easily accessible. That means I can get them to Malawi in the shortest time possible, within a week. I wouldn't have to wait for months to get shipped into Malawi. To get the skill, I'd easily get from Malawi or other nations closer by. To get whatever resource, it would be easier to attain that from within Africa, and would cut down the expenses in terms of money, would cut down the inefficiencies in terms of the time it takes for these things to get here, the value chain, and all these other important factors that matter in attaining competitive advantage. So if we have more companies, at the end of the day, it will make more companies in Africa as well become competitive on a global market, because it will be easier and cheaper to access resources, and it will be easier as well to be able to find it. Let's talk about markets for some of the products that we're already doing. So right now, having a few companies negatively affects us, because some of the things we need, we have to get them from companies far, thousands and thousands of kilometers from our borders. So we need to build these companies so that we can attain this competitive advantage. The fifth factor is wealth creation. So on economy, the point was more on the nation. But on wealth creation, now we're talking about the owners, you and me, as someone who might start a company. As I build a company that's profitable, automatically I have to be making money. Let's take, for instance, I start a company. Or let's say I have 1 million kwacha to start a company, and I have options. So I can go buy a car, I can go buy shoes, buy a phone, or I can start and build a company. If I'm going to get a phone, eventually it will run out and it will decrease in value just by the day that I buy it. It will start lowering down on its value. This is the same with any other material possession. It lowers down in value over time. But if I'm going to invest this money and the business works out, that money will be growing in value, and then I'll be creating wealth to build more companies and to attain financial freedom. Freedom to buy houses, freedom to buy cars, freedom to pay for my children's school fees. Generally, my life will get better financially if I'm going to build a company. In the same way, if I build a company and that company grows to become a multinational, that means we're talking about dollars, pulas, rands, yens, pounds, euros coming into Malawi. And as all that money comes in millions and millions of dollars, then automatically, as a person, I'll have greater financial freedom. I'll have more money to diversify in my investments. I can even think about investing in other countries. Generally, I can be a person who has more money to do a lot more good in a country that needs more people who are well-to-do. So it creates wealth for the people, and as more people create wealth, then we see a lot of infrastructure going about. People start building nice buildings, skyscrapers. We'll see people building hospitals. We'll see people building schools. We'll see people donating to things that matter in a nation. But all that has to happen if people have money, and building companies can enable people to have such money. The other thing is social progress. You see, as we build companies, even our societies get to improve. Generally today, life is way better than it used to be 100 years for many societies. We have cars. That means people can easily move about. I can easily visit my relative in another nation or in another district. Why? Because they're cars. But those cars were built by a certain company. If I have to fly, then that company, starting from the airline company that operates the flights, that company is owned by someone. The company that manufactures the planes as well is owned by someone. So all these companies, as they're building and producing goods, and they're offering these services, in the end, those improve humanity and society. So it is a contribution to society when you think about starting a company that will offer a certain service or a product that will help people in a community. So we have to think about this as well beyond money. The more we have companies, we're improving society, we're creating jobs. The more we have companies, we're contributing to the GDP. The government has more tax revenue. And all this will come back to us. All this will come back to our neighbor. So it is a way to improve society. And if you have noticed, many societies that are well to do in terms of, let's say, the health sector, education sector, and all these other sectors are also countries that are well to do economically. They have the money to have that good standard of any other area that is important in the lives of people because they have the money to afford that. Malawi, we don't have a good health sector. We don't have a very prosperous education sector. Why? Because we don't have money. Bottom line, we don't have money. We can't pay the teachers. We can't buy books in schools. The students don't have school uniform. Students have to send back because of no school fees. And in the end, people are not educated. Why? Because there's no money. Companies can change this to a certain extent. We have to beat them. Lastly, it improves their living standards. I think I've already talked about this, that it improves the society and wealth creation, but the aftermath of all this is that general standards of people improve. We can notice this if you go to other countries that are well to do economically. You find that the most poorest people in their nations are not compared to the poorest people in our nations. What we call middle class there, here would be rich people. So if you attribute the companies and the economy of our nation improves, generally the standards of the people will improve. More people will be able to afford good houses. Most people will be able to afford private schools. Most people will be able to afford to get a car. Most people will be able to afford to have health insurance. Generally, the standards of people get improved as more companies are being introduced in an economy. So the benefits go beyond you as a person. The benefits go beyond your family. The benefits go beyond your community, your nation. Generally, a whole lot of people get their lives to improve when companies are being built. And that's why we have to think about this. In a nation that is growing so much in population, we have to create companies that can be able to back this up. Without it, then we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. So I hope from the few things that I've shared today, you'll be encouraged to think about doing something about this, because we can't continue to go on like this. We have to build companies. The efforts that it takes to run a small business pretty much are the same efforts that it takes to run a big business. We are not any different from the people in the US. We are not any different from people in China. As far as God's creation is concerned, we are all people who are given brains. We are all people with hearts. We are all people who can be able to think on the same level extent if we can be able to expose ourselves to the right knowledge, to have the right desire, and to give in the right effort. We can do what they can do. We can have our own Apple. We can have our own Mercedes-Benz. We can have our own Boeings. We can have our own mega companies, the Facebooks, the Googles, if we can have the desire to build these companies. Let's just not send our children to school just to go and do studies and get to have good jobs. That's a wrong mindset. It's a good thing, yes, when people get educated and we can afford them good careers. It's a good thing. But let's get away from this mindset whereby students are the ones that have to go out there to go and study, to go and do jobs. Then those that are not smart are the ones who get them into business. No. But even as parents, these are the times to get the young ones on the table and inspire them to start business. Even when you're in school, you don't have to have so much money. You can start where you are. Right now, you are going to be listening this from Acast. This is a company that I co-founded in college. So it doesn't take you be somewhere where you have so much money, you are so stable financially. No, where you are, you can get started. It just has to start with the desire to have this company, and things will change for better. That's where I want you to be by the end of this series. I hope this will encourage you in some way. I hope this will bless you in some way. Thank you. I will see you in the next episode. Adios.